So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Here, if I give the cable to you.
Wow. I don't even crank it up all the way to just... I had to. Your turn.
No, where are you going to go with this? Because funny enough, again, same settings. You know,
Yeah.
Where did you hear first that said I got to be this plexi?
Flamenco posture.
Oh,
I know, very
right,
nice.
right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a flamenco guitarist by the name of Slash. I was just told he was flamenco. So like riffs, like one that really stuck out with me was. You know?
Yeah, totally.
And like that really, he had this like sweetness and mid-range, but still on the hear the strings of the guitar organic side.
Let's go with you. Where did you go with this? How did you get there?
I mean, obviously Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin, just the big sound, like, oh my gosh, like just that all-enveloping, like, what is this? And I want to do that.
Right.
And I want to sound like that. And I want to be like nice and big. But then how you can get so beautifully like clean and delicate too. So something from just, and then just bringing it back just to something just nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Woo! And you're right. You see footage of him. You really do just see him roll down the volume.
Yeah.
That stuff. And he didn't have that many pedals.
Well, the thing was, at that era, everybody was only using an amp that had really a single channel. So their extra channel was the volume knob.
That's it.
You know, so you would have it all the way up for your leads, but then you'd have your rhythm sound where you turn your guitar down. So a lot of these guys, like Page or Hendrix, the thing was to have a very loud amp so that when you needed to play rhythm, you could be on 3 or 4 and still be heard. Yeah. You know, and then when they solo, you're at a good level for your solo. But that was a style of playing. Even Edward Van Halen was always using the volume knob to change the dynamics of what he was playing. Nobody had ever heard a sound that just jumped out of speakers like that. That was like massive. It had so much reverb, the sustain and the attack and all that stuff, and just the playing in general, it didn't sound like anything else. So that was like the first major sound of Marshall that I was like, I want to make that sound.
But the odd thing is, and maybe I'll just flick the switch, like the same settings as I actually am on the Variac Marshall. If I go back to the stock one.
The cool thing is that this pedal, the Lion pedal, is built in such a way so that it is taking every aspect of all of these Marshall amplifiers. Everything that you could ever do with a Marshall is in this box.
Right.
And then all the extra things that certain players like Edward would do are also in the box. So you have different kinds of boost, you have different kinds of EQ, you have different kinds of the Variac.
The Variac, the EP preamp, an EQ, very simple things to push the amp into those colors, which is all those guys had too.
Right.
So like I'm gonna leave it on the setting now. If you play something Ed-like and I'm on Variac, if you play it now, then I'll put it in stock mode, and you'll notice how much, we'll see, it'll feel different, but I think there's a sonic difference too.
Sure, and this is funny. I'll play you the very first thing, when I first met him, this is the very first thing he ever played when he plugged in a guitar. He's just put the cable in, turns the volume up, and he does this. And that already has a Van Halen sound right there.
Yeah.
But it's got open strings, it's got the... And you hear it's like finger tone. It's because he's pulling off. So that kind of sound, I was like, what? That sounds like it's Close Encounters or something, you know? And,
Now let's play the same thing with the stock amp.
Okay.
All it's literally doing is pulling the Variac out and...
It's much more percussive. It's more AC/DC. You know, like. So it's real. It's got a lot of bite there, but that doesn't sound like the Van Halen sound.
If I just go back to that.
it's not the vibe.
It's subtle. Weird.
Yeah, there was way more of your pick in the
Oh, yeah.
non-brown tone. Yeah, I can hear you pick.
But it's not the right thing. It's too pokey. So the compression of the Variac brings it all in, and then you get the high end that you need when you need it. But otherwise, it's smooth.
Yeah.
It's smoother, very much smoother.
And I will tell you, when you do that, all of this stuff exists in reality. There's a room that I have with all this actual gear in it. So when we did that, we literally took the amp, tore it back down, put the Variac up at 90, rebiased it hot, and for a few weeks, it lived as that amp.
But what's really cool too is that a lot of times, and this always is the case with a good guitar and a good amp, you turn your volume up, like we were saying, and it gets full sound, you turn it down, it cleans up. But a lot of times with things like this, where it's a modeling device, it doesn't really have the same kind of response or feel. And this, if we're gonna go for like, and then we turn it down, it's real spanky clean, which is like that sound that Ed would get. But you get all that stuff. And that's what is really great about this thing is you're going to get all the personality of the actual gear, but in the best circumstances.
Right.
And that's hard to do. And that's why this thing's going to be popular with guitar players.
There's another odd thing about all this too, is when we talk about the Marshalls on 10 is you'd have to be in the studio to get the plate reverb if you were doing the Ed thing, or you'd have to have a good sound man to put the delay and reverb post the amp for you. And we live in a world where we could take a pedal, I could put a reverb pedal after it and sound like I'm in the recording studio and put that reverb post, this Marshall on 10 thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, the thing about these though too, for people that are just learning about this, is you can just plug right into your interface. So you can basically have this sound in your pocket. And this is a very tiny thing to carry around, but you have all these layers of different Marshall tones that you can get in a box. And you can play it through a full wedge speaker or whatever you want and be live on stage and have it loud through the PA. But you can also use it in headphones and all that stuff. So it's a really great way to get a lot of these sounds, and you can make presets with it. So
the cool thing about that is just walking around here while everybody was playing, and you're walking around a club, and we talked about this. You're like, wow, I've heard guys plugged in the amp sound way worse.
Yeah.
And it's convincing because of what you're talking about, which is turning down. And then when you squeal, you get the real essence of an amp. And when you chug, you get the real essence of an amp. And those are the two things for me. Squeals always sound fake, and chugging always sounds like they EQ'd it wrong or something. But this thing just gives you everything that you want.
I'll give you the opposite scenario when we were working on it.
The opposite?
The opposite was, not the opposite. No, but there were days I'd put it on an A-B switch, or I'd have the real gear up on one rig, A-B switch over to this thing.
I'm going to call you a liar.
No, it's for real. No, it's okay. And I go back and forth when I'm nearing the end of development. Wow. And there was one day I was getting to it, like, man, I can't play my legato's getting terrible. And it wasn't working right, so I had to call my guy. I'm like, dude, what did we change? He's like, oh man, I messed up the biasing. The same errors we had with the real amp were actually happening in here. I'm like, oh dude, the biasing's too hot, it's off. Because it was stuttering like a bad fuzz. He had messed up the biasing in the power section, just like the real amp. And you realize like, we're doing little part for part, every single resistor capacitor in that amp. And I'd have the same days, I'm like, dude, it's biased too hot. We need to pull the biasing down. Wow. And all things you hear about dissipation, bias, like 35 volt milliamps on it, and all that same crap applied to this during development.
So it's like, so through that, you saw how accurate it was.
I saw how accurate because I would spend days listening to this thing biased 25 different ways.
I love how you can accurately get, I mean, we've all touched on it, just the low volume when you turn the volume down, but also the low volume dynamics when you're playing, when you literally play quieter.
Your volume's all the way up, but you play softer and it automatically responds.
2 days later, I was like, I forgot I'm not using my head anymore. I have the head through the aux, like at my desk in my house, and I just stopped.
So there's a weird thing about the Marshall having this Jeff Beck, Holsworth violin tone, but because of the tube's harmonic content under that, it still cuts. Yeah. And if you don't do all of that correctly, you're like, well, this just sounds like 1D. It's lifeless.
Well, and the other thing is too, is I was like, it's got everything that you want out of an amp, but I was actually putting like overdrive pedals in front of it to see what. And again, it's like an amp. You get a different flavor. Like this is my nachos, and this is my burger, and this is my pizza, and I go play. The funny thing is you throw that into your system with everything that you got going, and then you put a plug-in in for reverb or delay or something like that. And it's like, this sounds like I could just record it right now and send it to the artist, and they'd be like, sounds great.
Yeah. So I'll start from the top. So there's basketweave 68.
Wow, what a difference.
'30s.
30s with a 57 and 121, a little more modern mic selection. And then you've got JBLs and Celestians with 57. I did put one cab that was a single 12, because we also talked about it's really a 412 cab because it's 4 speakers. They sort of fight each other and comb and do this weird mid-range thing. So, which is, if I do a 112, it's a little more focused. So this is an EV.
Very focused.
These are 212 D65s.
Oh, wait. Oh, I just learned the pedal a little. So you're rifling through more than just three
Yeah,
options.
yeah, 6.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Again, completely different sound.
That has closer to the Randy Rhoads kind of vibe.
It's a little bit. You know, not a big sound, but it pokes out of a mix.
Yeah.
Right.
It's right here, aggressive.
Oh, you heard that.
Yeah.
He's got some crazy ears, this guy.
Yeah. And then the last one is the B30s with the 414, which is big and wide.
That sounds good.
What would that be typical? Like who would sound like that?
Well, if you're trying to push it into more like that modern scooped metal thing, I would use that. Or you're trying to make it sound like a giant, I'd say Fenders, because Fenders typically were sort of mid-scooped on those black panel amps.
Yeah.
So if you make it a clean sound, it's like an overbuilt Fender or almost Dumble-y thing.
Bassman.
But you bring up another topic too, is when I used to read like interviews with people like, well, we really like this speaker with this mic, and you realize the homework it takes to go, well, you have to try all of the microphones.
Yeah.
And you listen to each speaker in the cab and go, well, which one
crazy.
is the best one?
Well, and it's the same thing with you when you're in the studio so many times and just doing different things, and you love this cabinet and that speaker and this microphone.
In that position.
You have a go-to now when you go to a session, and now you have a go-to in a box.
The 68 cabinet is borrowed from Joe Bonamassa.
Wow, see?
Because I asked him one day, like, dude, I really need a 68 basket weave slant with all the Tolix ripped off the cabinet. He's like, hold my beer. And he goes into his storage locker and drags out that exact thing I asked him for.
It's like you can go from like... Like it's rock and roll in a box.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is the Marshall thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. And I wanted to pay respect to that amp, that I love them.
Yeah, that's a great testament to what you've done with cabinets. It's like, there's so many options.
But there's not too many, but you should be able, and we do this in a certain order, like there should be a beautiful sort of that buttery, crossroadsy kind of Becky sound that also should be the one that cuts. There's thankfully the Ed-inspired mix of JBL high end with the mid-range and lows,
Right.
and a mixed cab Celestian, the EV12Os, which was a little more of an 80s studio trick to load down your amps and put them into 112 cabs used to see a lot of studio guys with wet, dry, wet with 2 or 3 EVs in a studio thing, which was focused. It got rid of all the speakers and the volume in the room, which has that sound. So it has all the right things you should have to get a palette of sound. When you're going for a tone, when you first walk up to an amp, in your head, what are you trying to dial in?
If you're in a pinch and you need to get it quick,
Right.
you need your go-to sound. And it's usually just a Marshall into a cabinet with a 57 in the right spot. And I can play AC/DC, and I can play Van Halen with the right overdrive and stuff like that. But that, to me, is what makes magic.
Same thing for you. When you walk up to the amp, what song or riffs in your head? Like, if I can at least play this, I'm good to get to rehearsal or a fly date or a session.
The thing I'm looking for the most is, can I overdrive it right up to this line where it's not too overdriven? And if I spank it, it barks. And it's got a little sparkle. And if I get up to a high note, like, will it shine? And then if I play light with a soft touch, will it react there too?
Right.
And if I feel like I have this full dynamic range, and it's like, we were talking about this, we have the same thing. It's like, we prefer the middle more than the brown just because our ear is just like, give me that openness, but it's still overdriven. It's got attack. And I think I try to get every amp that I ever have had to there. Like my progression from that vintage modern, then went to an 81-800, and I was like, okay, now we're more cooking with gas. But then I honed it down to the point where I was like, okay, right at noon isn't enough. And one more is too much. I was like, there's the spot. And then someone was like, oh, you're a plexi guy. You need to play plexis.
Right.
And so then I found that, and that's like the whole range is kind of where I want it to be. But that's mainly what I look for if I'm on a fly date and I'm,
for sure,
but this would be just a side note. Because, tube amps, you don't know what you're getting, fly dates. You've got that in your back pocket, if something goes down. If that's right there in your check, you just, you save the gig.
What were you walking up to the amp and needing?
For me, there's that relationship between the hands, the heart, the guitar, and the amp. And getting that sound and feeling the room and getting inspired by all 4 of those things and getting it to lock. And really lock in the heart, because that's where you play. That's where you play, and then it comes through and all of these things. To be able to speak not only through, having a great, pair of guitars is wonderful, of course, but having a wonderful foundation of just a great amp that is solid, that talks to you. You play, it responds.
Right.
It's a beautiful call and response. So having that relationship between those 2 things, it makes you want to play better. And again, just having that conversation not only with, say an audience or with yourself and as you're playing, but really having that relationship and that conversation between guitar and amp and heart and hands. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, that pedal made playing these guitars really easy today.
Well, it translated to like listening to you play, it totally translated to the listener.
It's expressive, and it's very human in the way that it's, I like using the word human just in the way that it connects to not only the listener, because we're a listener first when we play as players. We're listeners first. And how it connects and inspires. It's a cool little box.
What I noticed for you, and hopefully this makes sense, is if everything works right, you forget the guitar, you forget the amp, and it just goes from here straight out.
That's it.
No,
Absolutely.
I like that, what you said.
I don't like that.
I like that. I like what she said, because you can follow, if you follow that, you can knob twiddle until that seems to be open.
And it's just easy. It just comes out. You're not
And it's
fighting
there.
the amp. You're not fighting the guitar.
And you're there to play. And you're there to do what you
You're making
do.
music. You're playing now.
Yeah, that is the challenge at the end of the day, is that you have to be comfortable enough that you aren't inhibited by what you feel like might not work.
Right.
Because if you feel like there's some area you got to stay away from, then you're going to play differently. But having said that, I like to be in situations where a different instrument or a different amp will make me play differently, because I don't feel like I have to play the same all the time, and I don't want to.
Right.
So I want to adapt to the sound, and so stuff like this where you have a lot of options is fun, because you put something on and then you just kind of get lost in whatever that is.
I will say I got to see each one of you at home play, all sounding different, all playing differently, but all having fun. And not, you can tell when someone's not having fun playing something.
Right.
And at some point, it's like, oh, they're just playing guitar.
Yeah.
and you lose track of time, and you're in a zone. So being able to do that, I think
love
was
how Dweezil put it, because I hate it when people are like, no, it's got to be this and this and this, or I just can't do my thing. I'm like, well, you get up and do your thing, and
you gotta adapt, otherwise you get left behind.
Adapting. That's the thing, right?
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here today.
Oh man, thanks for having us.
It was an honor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can we hug and kiss now? Is it over? All right. Yay, everybody. Woo!